So now we are at the last unit of interest rate, and in this unit we will be discussing macroeconomic factors that influence the interest rate. We will be discussing four main factors: monetary policy, federal budget, international factors, and the level of business activity. So the Federal Reserve policy. The Federal Reserve policy or the monetary policy is related to the money supply and the interest rate. So if the government wants to stimulate the economy, they are going to increase the money supply. And because there is an increase in the money supply, there will be a decline in the short-term rates. And there will also be an increase in the expected future inflation because the money supply is being increased in the economy. And that would have an impact of an increase in the long-term rates. So if their money supplies increase, it might have two impacts. One is that the short-term rates will decrease, and the other impact is that the long-term rates will rise because of the increase in the expected inflation. Then there comes the federal budget. So if there is a budget deficit, which means that the government is spending more than they're collecting in taxes, then the government is going to borrow money. And the demand for funds is going to increase, because of which the interest rate is going to rise. Another way that the government can finance its budget deficit is by printing money. But when the government prints money in order to do so, it actually leads to more inflation because there is more money chasing the same amount of goods. And the increased inflation is going to lead to a higher interest rate once again. So in short, if there is a budget deficit, most likely the interest rates are going to increase in the economy. Then we have international factors. So let's assume that the imports are greater than the exports, which is the case in Pakistan. That means that we have a foreign trade deficit. Now, if there is a deficit, that deficit actually needs to be financed from some place. And for that, we actually borrow from other countries. And if we are borrowing from other countries, then our interest rate has to be market competitive. So we are going to compete with the global marketplace. So if you are going to decrease your interest rates to a very low level, then you will find that it will be difficult to borrow from other countries in order to finance the trade deficit. So the government has to keep that in mind as well, due to which they cannot lower the interest rates too much in order to stimulate the economy, because on the other side, they also have to look at the foreign trade deficit and how are they going to manage the foreign exchange in the country. And we are going to discuss this in more detail when we come to the foreign exchange topic. Then we have the business activity. For that, we have a graph over there, and you can see that the short-term rates are especially volatile. They rise rapidly during booms and they fall equally rapidly during recessions compared to the long-term rates. So the long-term rates still have some stability, whereas the short-term rates are going to have a dramatic increase and decrease. So they are going to be very volatile and more risky. Now, during recessions, usually interest rates tend to fall. The reason being that the demand for money and the rate of inflation tend to fall during recession. And moreover, the money supply is also increased in an effort to stimulate the economy. And we have already discussed that if the money supply is increased, the interest rate tends to decline.